I am sitting in my $1 million house in Highland Park, staring out at the garden where my three kids used to play just 2 weeks ago. The silence feels heavier than the mortgage payments I make on this place every month. 2 weeks ago, I gave my children an ultimatum that changed everything. I told them to respect my boyfriend Marcus or leave my house. I thought I was protecting my relationship, standing up for the man I love. Now, as I look at the empty rooms where Sarah, Jake, and Emma used to laugh and fight and fill this house with life, I wonder if I made the biggest mistake of my life. The choice seemed so clear then. Now nothing feels clear at all. Before I tell you about the decision that turned my world upside down, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you have ever faced the impossible choice between love and family, please hit that like button so I know I am not alone in this struggle. Do not forget to subscribe because I will be sharing more real stories about the messy, complicated truths of modern relationships. Now, let me take you back 3 years to where this all began. 15 years. That is how long David and I were married before everything fell apart. We met in college, got married young, and built what everyone thought was the perfect American family. David worked as an accountant downtown, steady and reliable, always coming home with spreadsheets and investment reports. I built my interior design business from nothing, working out of our spare bedroom until I could afford my own office space. We had three beautiful children. Sarah was 17, smart as a whip, but with her father's stubborn streak. Jake was 15, quiet and artistic, always strumming his guitar in his room. Emma, our baby at 12, still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. Our house in Highland Park was worth $1,200,000. I knew because David reminded me every time we argued about money. He loved talking numbers, percentages, profit margins. What he stopped talking about was us. Somewhere between soccer practices and mortgage payments, between client meetings and parent-teacher conferences, David and I became strangers living under the same roof. I felt like a ghost in my own home, floating through rooms where my husband barely looked up from his laptop to acknowledge my presence. Our conversations became purely functional. Who was picking up Emma from dance class? What time Jake needed to be at guitar lessons? Whether Sarah had finished her college applications? We talked about our children constantly, but never about ourselves. When was the last time David asked me about my dreams, my fears, my day? Beyond the logistics of running our household, I could not remember. I started feeling invisible, like I was disappearing one day at a time. That is when Marcus Thompson walked into my life. He was 32, 3 years younger than me, with warm brown eyes that actually looked at me when I spoke. I hired his architecture firm to redesign my office space, thinking I needed a change in my work environment. I had no idea I was about to change my entire life. Marcus listened when I explained my vision for the space. He asked thoughtful questions about lighting, about flow, about how I wanted clients to feel when they walked through the door. No one had asked me how I wanted to feel about anything in years. During our 3-month collaboration, Marcus and I spent hours talking about more than just business. He told me about his divorce 2 years earlier, how he and his ex-wife had grown apart without ever really fighting about it. They just woke up one day and realized they were living separate lives in the same apartment. He had no children, no messy custody arrangements, no complicated family dynamics. His honesty about his loneliness made me realize how lonely I had become in my own marriage. The first time Marcus touched my hand was during a late afternoon meeting in October. Rain was drumming against the windows of my office, and he was showing me fabric samples for the reception area chairs. When he reached across the table to point out a detail in the weave, his fingers brushed mine. The electricity I felt in that moment was something I had not experienced in years. I should have pulled my hand away. Instead, I let it linger there, feeling alive for the first time in so long. Our first kiss happened 3 weeks later in that same office. Marcus was installing the final light fixtures, and I was staying late to approve the work. The space looked beautiful, transformed from the cramped, outdated office I'd worked in for 5 years into something bright and welcoming and new, just like I felt when I was with him. When he asked if I was happy with how everything turned out, I said yes, but I was not talking about the office anymore. He knew it too. The kiss was gentle at first, then desperate, like we were both drowning, and had finally found someone who could breathe life back into us. For 6 months, I lived two completely different lives. At home, I was Amanda, the wife, Amanda, the mother, going through the motions of family dinners and homework help and pretending everything was fine. With Marcus, I was just Amanda, a woman who deserved to be seen and heard and cherished. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I could not stop myself. The guilt was constant, but so was the joy I felt when I was with him. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. David discovered the affair when he borrowed my phone to check his email and found text messages from Marcus. Not the business messages we had exchanged months earlier, but the intimate ones, the late night conversations about meeting up, about missing each other, about the future we were starting to imagine together. The confrontation was ugly and necessary and final. David stood in our kitchen holding my phone like it was evidence in a trial and asked me to choose him or Marcus, our family or my affair. I chose Marcus. I chose love over security passion, over stability possibility, over the known quantity of a marriage that had been dying slowly for years. The divorce took 8 months to finalize. David fought me on everything except custody. He knew I was a good mother, even if I had been a terrible wife. I kept the house and primary custody of the children. David moved into a two-bedroom apartment across town close enough for easy visitation, but far enough that we rarely had to see each other. 6 months after the divorce was final, I decided it was time for my children to meet Marcus. I had been patient, giving them space to adjust to the new reality of their parents living apart. I thought enough time had passed for them to be ready to accept that their mother deserved happiness too. I was wrong about almost everything. I planned the introduction carefully. A casual Sunday dinner at home, nothing too formal or intimidating. I made Sarah's favorite lasagna and Jake's favorite garlic bread. I bought Emma's favorite ice cream for dessert. Marcus arrived at 5:30 with flowers for me and small gifts for each of the children. A book about architecture for Sarah since she was interested in engineering. Guitar picks with intricate designs for Jake. A art set with professional colored pencils for Emma who loved to draw. The moment Marcus walked through our front door, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Sarah looked at him with undisguised hostility, her green eyes cold and calculating. She was her father's daughter, in that moment, already judging and finding Marcus wanting. Jake barely looked up from his phone when I introduced them, offering a limp handshake that lasted exactly 1 second. Emma hid behind me, peeking around my legs like Marcus was some kind of monster. Dinner was the longest 90 minutes of my life. Marcus tried valiantly to engage the children in conversation. He asked Sarah about her college plans, complimented Jake on the guitar music drifting down from his room, told Emma he had heard she was an amazing artist. Every attempt at connection was met with one-word answers or uncomfortable silence. Sarah spent most of the meal comparing everything Marcus said to something their father had done better. The garlic bread was not as good as when Dad made it. Dad was funnier. Dad understood them in ways Marcus never could. When Marcus excused himself to use the bathroom, Sarah leaned across the table and whispered fiercely, "How could you bring him here? This is our house. This is where we live with you, not with some random guy you barely know." Jake nodded in agreement, speaking up for the first time all evening. "Mom, this is really weird. We do not want him here." Emma started crying, asking why Daddy could not come to dinner instead. I tried to explain that Marcus was important to me, that I hoped they could get to know him, and maybe even like him someday. I told them that just because I was not married to their father anymore did not mean I had to be alone forever. I thought they would understand that their mother was still a person with feelings and needs beyond just taking care of them. I was asking too much too soon. After Marcus left that night, promising to be patient and understanding, Sarah called an emergency family meeting in the living room. At 17, she had appointed herself the spokesperson for all three children. She announced that they had discussed it and agreed that they did not want Marcus in their house anymore. They did not want to get to know him better. They wanted their family to go back to the way it was before, even if that meant their parents living apart. The campaign against Marcus began the next day and escalated quickly into psychological warfare. When he came over for dinner the following week, Jake had conveniently invited 3 friends over to play video games in the living room at maximum volume. When I asked them to quiet down, Jake said he had forgotten Marcus was coming over. The innocent look on his face told me the forgetting was completely intentional. Emma developed a sudden habit of having nightmares whenever Marcus stayed over, waking up crying and calling for her daddy in the middle of the night. The first time it happened, I thought it was coincidence. By the third time, I realized it was strategy. Sarah started inviting her boyfriend Trevor over without giving me advance notice, timing his arrivals for exactly when Marcus and I were trying to have quiet dinners together. The sabotage became more sophisticated as weeks passed. Jake spilled coffee on Marcus's laptop during breakfast, claiming it was an accident while reaching for the sugar. Sarah played her music loud enough to rattle the windows whenever Marcus tried to work on his architecture projects at our dining room table. Emma refused to speak to Marcus, directly addressing all communication through me as if he were invisible. Every interaction became a comparison to David. When Marcus cooked dinner, it was never as good as Dad's spaghetti. When he tried to help with homework, he did not explain math the way Dad did. When he laughed at something on television, his laugh was too loud, not gentle and quiet like Dad's. They were determined to make Marcus feel like an intruder in his own relationship. I tried reasoning with them individually. I sat Sarah down for a heart-to-heart conversation about love and second chances and the complexity of adult relationships. She listened politely and then said, "Mom, I do not care about your feelings. You destroyed our family for this guy, and we are never going to forgive either of you for it." Her words cut deeper than any argument David and I had ever had. My attempts at family bonding failed spectacularly. I planned a picnic in the park, thinking neutral territory might help everyone relax. The children spent the entire afternoon on their phones, barely acknowledging Marcus's presence. When he offered to teach Jake some guitar techniques he had learned in college, Jake responded, "Thanks, but I only take music advice from my dad." The rejection in his voice was sharp enough to cut. Marcus started staying over less frequently, making excuses about work projects and early meetings. I could see the strain wearing on him, the way his shoulders tensed when he walked into the house, the forced smile he wore whenever my children were around. He never complained directly, but I knew he was questioning whether our relationship was worth this constant battle. I was questioning it too. The breaking point came during Emma's 13th birthday party 3 months later. I had planned a beautiful celebration with all her friends from school, a professional photographer, and decorations that took me 6 hours to put up. Marcus had offered to make Emma's birthday cake from scratch, spending the entire previous evening perfecting the recipe and decoration. It was 3 layers of chocolate with vanilla buttercream frosting, decorated with delicate sugar flowers in Emma's favorite colors. David arrived for the party exactly on time, bringing Emma's favorite present, a new set of art supplies she had been wanting for months. I had invited him because Emma specifically asked for her father to be there, and I could not deny her that on her birthday. The moment David and Marcus were in the same room together, the atmosphere became electric with tension. Sarah, ever the strategist, had arranged the seating so that David and Marcus ended up sitting directly across from each other at the dining room table. She watched with satisfaction as both men struggled to make polite conversation while surrounded by Emma's chattering friends. I could see Marcus growing more uncomfortable by the minute, clearly feeling like he did not belong at this family celebration. When it came time for Emma to blow out her candles and make a wish, she closed her eyes tight for a long moment before opening them and announcing to the entire party, "I wished for Mommy and Daddy to get back together, and for the stranger in our house to go away forever." The room fell silent except for the sound of my heart breaking. Marcus stood up, immediately mumbled something about needing air, and walked out of the room. I followed him into the kitchen where he was leaning against the counter, staring at the floor. "Amanda, I cannot do this anymore," he said quietly. "I love you, but I cannot keep coming into your house feeling like I am the enemy. Your children will never accept me, and I do not blame them. Maybe I should just step back and let you focus on your family." The thought of losing Marcus sent panic shooting through my chest. After David, after years of feeling invisible and unimportant, Marcus had reminded me what it felt like to be truly loved. I was not ready to give that up. I was not ready to sacrifice my happiness for children who seemed determined to make both of us miserable. That night, after the last birthday party guest had gone home and the dishes were washed and Emma's presents were put away, I made a decision that would change everything. I called a family meeting for the next morning. I'd given my children months to adjust, months to get used to the idea that Marcus was part of my life now. I'd tried patience and understanding and gentle persuasion. None of it had worked. It was time for a different approach. Saturday morning, I gathered Sarah, Jake, and Emma in the living room and delivered the news that would split our family apart. Marcus is going to move in with us. I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. We have been together for almost 2 years now, and it is time for our relationship to move forward. This is my house, and I have the right to decide who lives here. The explosion was immediate and fierce. Sarah jumped to her feet, her face flushed with anger. Absolutely not, she shouted. This is our home too, and we do not want him here. You cannot just decide something this big without asking us. Jake started crying, something I had not seen him do since he was Emma's age. Emma looked terrified, like her whole world was collapsing around her. I had rehearsed this speech in my head dozens of times, but seeing my children's faces made every word feel like a knife in my throat. Still, I pressed on. I understand this is difficult for all of you. Change is hard. But I need you to understand that I deserve to be happy. I deserve to have love in my life. Marcus makes me happy in ways I have not felt in years. What about our happiness? Sarah demanded, tears streaming down her face now. What about what we need? We need our mom, not some new family with a man we barely know. Her words hit their mark, but I forced myself to stay strong. I had made my decision. You have two choices, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You can learn to respect Marcus as a member of this family, or you can go live with your father. I am not asking you to love him immediately. I am just asking you to treat him with basic human decency. No more sabotage. No more cruel comments. No more making him feel unwelcome in what will be his home, too. The ultimatum hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything I held dear. Jake was sobbing openly now, and Emma had curled up in a ball on the couch, overwhelmed by emotions too big for her 12-year-old heart to process. Sarah stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and betrayal that I will never forget. You are making us choose between you and our own comfort. Sarah said, her voice shaking with fury and hurt. You are putting your boyfriend before your own children. How is that love? Mom, how is that what a good mother does? I gave them 1 week to decide. 7 days to think about what I had said and make their choice. 7 days that felt like 7 years, filled with cold silences and slammed doors and phone calls to David that I was not supposed to hear. Marcus tried to convince me to reconsider, to find another way, but I was determined to stand my ground. I thought I was being strong. I thought I was teaching my children an important lesson about respect and boundaries. I was wrong about everything. At the end of that week, all 3 of my children packed their bags and moved to David's apartment. Sarah was the last to leave, stopping at the front door to deliver one final blow. You chose him over us, she said, her voice flat and emotionless. Do not ever forget that this was your choice, Mom. When you are lonely in this big house with your new boyfriend, remember that you chose this. The first week after my children moved out, I threw myself into the fantasy that Marcus and I were starting a beautiful new chapter together. No more tension at dinner. No more walking on eggshells around sullen teenagers. No more feeling like I had to choose between my happiness and my family's comfort every single day. Marcus moved his belongings into my house slowly, almost reluctantly, as if he sensed that something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. We had the whole house to ourselves for the first time since we had been together. The sprawling Highland Park mansion that had once echoed with the sounds of 3 active children now felt cavernous and quiet. Marcus set up his drafting table in what used to be Jake's guitar practice room, but he kept the door closed most of the time. I think seeing Jake's music posters still on the walls made him uncomfortable. I tried to fill the silence with activity. I cooked elaborate dinners for 2 that we ate at the massive dining room table where 5 people used to gather every night. I suggested movie nights in the home theater David had built for family time. I planned romantic evenings by the pool where Emma used to practice her swimming strokes for the school team. Every space in the house held memories of my children, and I was discovering that love could not simply erase the emptiness they left behind. Marcus was gentle and patient during those first few weeks, but I could see the guilt weighing on him. He had never wanted to be the reason a family fell apart, even a family that was already fractured. Sometimes I caught him staring out the window at the swing set in the backyard that no one used anymore, and I knew he was questioning whether our love was worth the price I had paid for it. 3 weeks into our new living arrangement, I received a text from Emma. It was a photo of a drawing she had made a picture of our family before the divorce. In the drawing, David and I stood in the middle, holding hands with Sarah, Jake, and Emma gathered around us. We all had big smiles and the sun was shining brightly overhead. At the bottom in Emma's careful handwriting were the words, "I miss when we were all happy together." That drawing broke something inside me that I'd been trying to keep intact. I stared at it for 20 minutes, crying in my empty kitchen, while Marcus worked upstairs in Jake's old room. My 12-year-old daughter was living in a cramped apartment with her father and siblings because I had chosen to prioritize my romantic relationship over her sense of security and belonging. What kind of mother does that make me? The house felt different with Marcus living there full time. His presence, which had once felt exciting and new, now felt somehow wrong in the spaces where my children used to live. He was respectful of their belongings, never moving or touching anything in their rooms, but his very existence in the house felt like an intrusion on memories I was not ready to let go of. 2 months after I gave my children the ultimatum that drove them away, I found myself sitting in the office of Dr. Barbara Klein, a family therapist that my sister had recommended. I had never been to therapy before, had always prided myself on being strong enough to handle my own problems. But I was drowning in regret and confusion, and I needed someone to help me understand what I had done to my family. Dr. Klein was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a direct manner that cut through my attempts to justify my actions. During our first session, she asked me a simple question that shattered all my rationalizations. "Amanda, when you gave your children that ultimatum, were you thinking about what was best for them or what was best for you?" The answer was obvious and painful. I had been thinking entirely about myself, about my need to be validated and respected in my own home. I had not considered how terrifying it must have been for my children to feel like they had to choose between their mother and their sense of safety. I had not thought about how my ultimatum had forced them into an impossible situation where any choice they made would result in loss. Children of divorce are already dealing with a fundamental disruption to their sense of security. Dr. Klein explained during our second session, when you force them to choose between accepting your boyfriend or losing their primary home, you essentially told them that your romantic relationship was more important than their emotional well-being. That is a very difficult message for children to process. I started to understand that my children's resistance to Marcus had never really been about Marcus himself. It had been about their need to protect what remained of their family unit after the divorce. By bringing Marcus into our home and demanding that they accept him, I had been asking them to give up their fantasy that their parents might reconcile someday. I had been asking them to grieve the loss of their original family all over again. Dr. Klein helped me see that love built on the foundation of ultimatums and forced choices is not really love at all. It is control disguised as romance. Real love would have been patient enough to give my children the time they needed to heal from the divorce before introducing major changes to their living situation. Real love would have prioritized my children's emotional needs over my desire to move my relationship forward. The turning point came during my fourth session when Dr. Klein asked me what I truly wanted. Did I want to be right, or did I want my family back? Did I want to prove that I had the power to make decisions about my own home, or did I want to repair the damage I had done to my relationship with my children? The choice was clear, but admitting it meant acknowledging that I had been wrong about almost everything. I started writing letters to my children that same week. Not text messages or emails, but actual handwritten letters that took me hours to compose. I wrote to Sarah first, acknowledging that I had put her in an impossible position and asking her to forgive me for prioritizing my own needs over her comfort and security. I wrote to Jake apologizing for dismissing his feelings and making him feel like his voice did not matter in his own home. I wrote to Emma trying to explain in words a 12-year-old could understand that sometimes adults make mistakes when they are trying to find happiness. Marcus found me crying over Emma's letter one evening and asked what he could do to help. For the first time since we had been together, I told him the complete truth about how I was feeling. I told him that I loved him deeply, but that I had handled the situation with my children terribly. I told him that I needed to find a way to rebuild my relationship with them, even if it meant taking a step back from our living situation. To his credit, Marcus listened without getting defensive or angry. He had been feeling the weight of the situation too, knowing that our happiness was costing my children their sense of home and security. Amanda, he said quietly, I fell in love with you partly because you were such a devoted mother. If being with me means you cannot be the mother your children need, then we need to figure out a different way to make this work. That conversation changed everything between us. Instead of feeling like I had to choose between Marcus and my children, I started to see that real love would find a way to honor both relationships. We talked late into the night about taking things slower, about finding ways for my children to gradually get comfortable with our relationship without feeling like their home was being invaded. The first step was simple but significant. I asked Marcus to move back to his own apartment temporarily while I worked on rebuilding trust with my children. It was not about ending our relationship, it was about acknowledging that I had moved too fast and pushed too hard. Marcus agreed immediately, understanding that our relationship could only be truly healthy if it was not built on the ruins of my relationship with my children. I sent each of my children individual invitations to meet with me, not as a group where they might feel pressured to present a united front, but one on one, where we could have honest conversations about how to move forward. Sarah was the first to respond, agreeing to meet me for coffee at a neutral location where we could talk without distractions. That conversation in the small cafe downtown was the hardest and most important discussion I have ever had with my daughter. Sarah told me how betrayed she had felt when I chose Marcus over their comfort, how scared she had been of losing me completely to this new relationship. She cried as she described feeling like she had to take care of Jake and Emma emotionally because their mother had become unavailable too, focused on her new romance to see how much her children were struggling. I listened without defending myself, without making excuses, without trying to explain away the pain I had caused. I simply acknowledged that I had made serious mistakes and asked what I could do to begin earning back her trust. Sarah's answer was simple: show up for your children the way you used to before Marcus became your priority. That evening, I called Jake and asked if I could attend his next guitar recital at school. I had missed the previous two because of dinner plans with Marcus, something that seemed unthinkable to me now. Jake's voice was small and uncertain when he said yes, but I heard hope underneath the hesitation. I called Emma and asked if she wanted to go shopping for art supplies together, just the two of us like we used to do before everything changed. These small gestures were not magic solutions. My children did not immediately forgive me or welcome me back with open arms, but they were the beginning of a longer conversation about how to rebuild trust and connection that had been damaged by my poor choices. More importantly, they were proof that I was finally prioritizing my role as their mother over my desire to be validated as Marcus's girlfriend. 6 months later, my family still is not fully healed, but we are learning to be honest with each other about our needs and feelings. My children are slowly starting to trust that I will not abandon them again for a romantic relationship. Marcus and I are dating more intentionally now, building our relationship in ways that do not threaten my children's sense of security. I learned that real happiness cannot be built on the foundation of other people's pain, especially not the pain of your own children. Love that demands ultimatums is not really love. It is selfishness disguised as romance. The truest form of love is patient enough to wait for the right time and wise enough to put the most vulnerable people first. Sometimes, to protect the relationships that matter most, we have to let go of our need to control the timeline. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step back and allow healing to happen, slowly, naturally, without force or ultimatums or demands for immediate acceptance. Have you ever had to choose between love and family? How did you handle the situation? And what would you do differently if you could go back? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I know I am not the only person who has struggled with these impossible choices. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more honest conversations about the complex realities of modern relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is never too late to choose your children over your pride. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that the best time to start being the parent your children need is always right now, regardless of the mistakes you have made in the past.